So now let's talk about some of the potential challenges and how you can overcome them in your practice of semen retention. Probably the biggest is going to be the urges and temptations that you're going to encounter. Your mind is going to try to convince you to release. You'll feel especially tempted towards pornography, towards the attention of women, and there's going to be a very strong pull towards that sexual energy leaking out in various different ways. Now, because of the buildup of energy, you're also going to be attracting more attention from your girlfriend, your wife, women out there in the world. So semen retention is going to increase your tests and temptations. When these come along, it's really important that you focus on your long-term goal and remind yourself why you're doing this. We need to be able to delay gratification and focus on the bigger goal instead of the quick satisfaction that comes from ejaculating. And trust me, I know how tempting that is. I've been developing that and cultivating that for years, and having a full range of failures up until successes and everything in between. Now, with that said, I think it's also to emphasize the fact that we are not looking for a dogmatic or repressive kind of control here. I've made this mistake in the past and it definitely messed me up. The first 5 years of my semen retention practice, I was approaching it very strict. That was a part of the sort of tantric ideology that I was in. There was a very strong sort of push to never ejaculate because it wasn't spiritual. It was inferior. It was demonized in a certain sense, and that wasn't very healthy. It led me to feeling really guilty and shame, like ashamed when I would ejaculate or I would have an accident in lovemaking and mess it up. And that was bad because I was already dealing with enough sexual shame. I already had a ton of repression and rejection of my sexuality. The struggles with premature ejaculation had marked me. So then I flipped to the other end of the spectrum and repressively tried to control it, vowing never to let myself go down that path and ejaculate unconsciously again. And that developed this kind of, this repressive attitude, this kind of dogmatic approach towards semen retention. And I see that in the sort of online community, in the nofap community, and in the spiritual community with men sort of committing to brahmacharya, in which it becomes like a spiritual discipline. So we need to be mindful. We want to find the sweet spot in the middle. We want to have that strong aspiration to master your urges and to experience something different and to approach lovemaking in a new way. But if it becomes uncomfortable, if it builds up and those urges become too much, we don't want to shame that out of ourselves. We don't want to block it. We want to be able to enjoy the pleasure and find a path of freedom. We need to be able to give ourselves permission to release and to not beat ourselves up about it if we relapse, if we fail, if we choose to ejaculate, or our lover tempts us to do so. Now, if you are approaching this from the tantric perspective and you are experiencing this kind of rigid, strict approach to it, that can be very beneficial. Obviously, that can take you a long way, but we need to be aware of the shadows, and we don't want to shame and demonize what is actually just a natural function of our body. And personally, this put a lot of pressure around intimacy. It created a lot of shame and repression of something that was very natural inside of me, and it demonized that. And for me, that wasn't particularly healthy, and it put me into a difficult and dark place. And since then, I started to experiment with it more flexibly. And the quality of my practice, the quality of my experiences, the quality of the lovemaking started to improve in an incredible way. So I really encourage these days finding a frequency that works for you, finding a path that feels natural, feels authentic, feels free, that you enjoy. And I don't really like being dogmatic or ideological about anything these days. You need to find what works for you. Another sort of hurdle that you might encounter is physical discomfort. So you might experience blue balls as you start to retain. You'll feel that energy building up. It can be painful. And this is a temporary experience. It happens especially in the beginning when you're starting to adjust. Your body is trying to adjust to retaining. And it's worth sticking with it and seeing if you can move that energy. Things that really help me is moving, gentle stretching, breathing, trying to circulate that energy and move it. And if worst comes to worst, obviously you can release and relieve yourself of the burden and start again. Try to just push your limit every time just a little bit more than you did the previous time and make sure you're making consistent progress. Another hurdle that you might encounter is social pressure. So obviously we live in a culture that glorifies instant gratification, especially when it comes to sex. Porn is at our fingertips and we can have it whenever we want. We're not particularly patient or disciplined when it comes to our urges, our needs and desires. So don't be surprised if people don't get why you are practicing semen retention. It's uncommon. From the normal perspective, it's weird. It's woo-woo. I remember when I first came back from India and I told my friends that I was starting to cultivate that energy and I was basically refraining from ejaculation. I remember their reaction and they were like, what the fuck? Why would you want to give that up? Like, that's weird. So just be prepared for that. It can also be difficult if you're in a relationship and the woman or the partner that you're with isn't used to having sex like that. They're used to a specific experience. They're used to getting you off. Many of us are programmed that sex is all about the release and getting each other off in different ways. So sometimes we need to reframe those expectations. And the way that I like to do that is to tie it back to the relationship. You're not giving up, you're not losing anything. You're actually opening the doors into new experiences and being experimental and trying something new, which can potentially have a huge payoff on the other side of it. If your partner is resistant, you need to express your desire and your need to experiment with this. You can say that this is something important to you. You might like to say, I've heard semen retention can be a really powerful practice for men, and it could help take our intimacy to a whole other level. I really want to experiment with it. I'd like to try making love without releasing to see how it is. And I want to share that experience with you. But I can't do it alone. I want you to be able to support me and I want to do it together. Are you open for that? As an example, I think it's pretty crucial that you have your intimate partner on board. Otherwise, it can be very, very challenging, if not impossible, to practice semen retention. If your partner wants you to come, good luck avoiding that, unless you're already masterful in the way that you control. So express your desire, express the willingness, talk about the potential benefits that it can have. You've heard that it can unlock orgasms without ejaculation, and you want to experience that. You want to see if it's possible. And if you have a loving, supportive partner, there's no reason to not be open to something as special as that. And you can literally go from making love for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes into multi-hour long lovemaking experiences. This is what I discovered. I've literally had nights where we just made love all night long. Because you don't ejaculate, you can just keep going. And it keeps getting better and better and deeper and more ecstatic.